So yeah, two of my favorite things, indie hacking and a tool called Postgraphile. Indie hacking is setting out to make money on the internet normally by building something yourself, by yourself, for yourself. And Postgraphile is a tool that turns a schema in your Postgres database to a GraphQL API. First, a little bit about me. So I'm a software engineer at Near Street. We're building a platform to get stock inventory data on the internet in real time using Node.js and AWS. We're currently looking to hire a senior engineer, so if anyone's interested, come and have a chat with me after in the pub. Also, I don't know if this is a feeling that anyone else has, but building things for myself makes me feel less incompetent. When I'm building things for other people, I feel the weight of my perception of their expectations, and it just weighs down on me. So when I build things to myself, I know I'm only going to let myself down, which is actually quite relieving. And I guess I'm also really inspired by people who build things and put it out on the internet for everyone to see. I find that really scary. I build something, if you put it out there, people are mean about it sometimes, and that really sucks. But actually there's a huge community of makers and people who create things, who share their stuff on the internet. There's a thing called Indie Hackers where there's a podcast and website and all that stuff. But I'm really inspired by all the things those people do. One problem though, often when you see about these things, they're building things using frameworks like Rails and Laravel, and where's the Node developers building things and putting them on the internet and trying to make money from them? There are a few, they're not impossible to find, but it's not as many. And I think sometimes maybe the tools are they're more suited to big companies like the Financial Times and Condé Nast, who are building things and have a lot of developer hours to spend and stuff like that. Whereas some of these frameworks are a little bit more fast and dirty, if you know what I mean. So I want to talk about a framework that I think, a thing that's that makes it really, really easy to build a GraphQL API very, very quickly, so you can get all that back-end work done and dusted, so you can focus on making a good user experience and actually making a good app, because that's kind of the fun bit for a lot of people. It also does lots of things like solve the n+1 query problem, where if you're sending queries to stuff, if you've got an ORM, you make a request for users, and then you get the data back, and then you make a request for something else. And before you know it, if you're requesting data across a lot of tables, either over REST or across your database, the performance of your application just goes. So this also helps with that. And I guess, what it basically does is it inspects your Postgres database. It then does this thing called query introspection that basically dives into the metadata about your schema and the tables, the functions, the permissions, and turns that into a GraphQL API. And it's also really, really easy to use. So to use it, too soon. You just run it's a CLI command. It's got a Node API that you can call in your code. There's loads of other ways to use it. But it's not the only tool out there that does it. There's two major alternatives, and sometimes they win out in the pros and cons list, so I'm going to talk a little bit about those. There's Hasura and Prisma. Has anybody heard of these things? Okay, a few people. So these tools are good, and they do the same thing. They inspect a database and turn it into a GraphQL API. But I don't think they're as good for two reasons. One, the community around GraphQL is amazing. The two people who work on it, maintain it, are both married to each other and live somewhere in the south coast of England, which I think is that's just super sweet. And also they're a really active community. It's actually a real open source community project where if you tweet them, they send you stickers and stuff. So if anyone would like some stickers, come and have a chat to me afterwards. And also, it's built with Node.js, whereas the others are built in Haskell and Rust. So if you want to extend this thing, you want to build a plugin, you want to wrap it in an Express server, you want to deploy it with serverless and Node.js, it's super, super easy. And because of that, it's a way more sustainable solution, where if these other tools are VC backed and have dirty capital and stuff, are all about vendor lock-in with these compiled languages and stuff. So sounds awesome in theory, but how does it weigh up in practice? I thought I'd try and build a meetup clone. I've called it Meetup. I spent a long time creating that. I shouldn't be proud, but I am. And it was a bit harder than I expected. I spent a fair bit of time and I didn't finish, but I built something that's reasonably complicated, without investing too much effort because I try to do other things with my life, like watch Netflix. So the idea was that it'd have a few like database tables of like events and attending and groups and organizers and comments and users and all that stuff. I'd create some tables and it would be done. I thought it'd be that easy. It kind of wasn't. Yeah, so we've got like we've got a schema, we've got some tables. We've also got a private table that's not exposed by GraphQL that contains like the password hash and users' emails. So like that could be bad if that was exposed over GraphQL. So there's like lots of nice patterns in Postgres that you can use to secure this information. We've also got some functions for registering users and authentication, and lots of kind of security stuff with like row level security and like adding permissions to tables so people can't update each other's profiles and stuff, which would be bad. So there's like loads of easy ways to do all that stuff in like a nice declarative way that makes life a little bit easier. But yeah, so like all that code's on GitHub. I'll share a link after the meetup on Twitter so you can have a look and see how it works without me having to like type in like 100 lines of SQL, which isn't very exciting. Yeah, so we can then like, let's get it started. Let's like actually see it in action. Let's see how easy it is. So yeah, that's small. Here we go. So I'm going to run a command with Docker Compose. It's going to start everything up. If you clone the repo that's in, you should be able to run Docker Compose and it should just work too. That means it's working. It's logging like crazy because I was playing around with live query mode. So I could do subscriptions and it'll like actually be real time with WebSockets and stuff, which is quite cool. But yeah, let's see it in action. So I have a bunch of GraphQL queries here to like fire into this database. So let's go back to Chrome. Why are Apple laptops hard to use? Is this gonna work? Yes, it's working. Okay, so I've got GraphQL. If anybody's not used this before, it's a way to like fire queries like GraphQL API and see stuff. It's also got a nice little explorer here where I can see all the queries I can make, the mutations I can make, and subscriptions I can make. If I get rid of all these comments, I'm glad I've got these to copy paste because typing with one hand is hard. I can register a user, and there we go. I've got one user in the system. I'm also going to register a second user. So we've got kind of some stuff to do when we start to query all the data. So we're doing a mutation, we're calling register a user with an input, an email, and a password, and we're getting the user right. GraphQL query syntax is so hard. Pardon? Even though it like auto-completes and stuff, I still mess it up. Because it's like the auto-completion is really nice, because it's got all the types and stuff, so I can go like token, and it's like, it's a JWT token, and it should be like self-documenting or something, because it's GraphQL. All right, we've got our JWT token. So now all this is being generated by SQL, by the way, and then like the like express layer that PostgraphIL comes with. So then you can like drop this in a header, and in future requests, you can now like log in with as this user without actually having to write any node.js code, which is super, super nice. So now we've got our auth token, we can start to run mutations against this thing. So if I go like, well, mutations that actually create data rather than the authentication one. So we can create a group. Oh, what have I done? I forgot to, that's proving that the authentication is actually valid. I was supposed to do that. There, and yeah, let's see if this works. Permission denied. I'm cocking this up. Oh, there's 2 quote marks there. Okay, let's try again. Permission denied. Let's go back. Live coding is terrifying, by the way. Really, really hard. There we go. Let's finish that off. Let's trial function. Nope. There we go. Permission denied. Okay, this isn't. Pardon? Do you need a closing curly brace? I think that's good. I think there's a problem with the JWT token.
Just try to put the uppercase.
Where? Oh, bearer?
Yes.
I don't think it's that. I think it's like.
Headers config is a JSON object, isn't it?
Pardon?
Isn't the headers config a JSON object?
I think it handles that for you, so it's like some weird thing. It was working earlier, but I think. Ends in a K.
I think the capital B thing might actually be the answers.
Okay, let's try it.
Yeah.
I trust you. Thanks.
Just the word there.
Bearer. It definitely worked earlier. So capital B for bearer. Lowercase b.
How many developers does it take to make it perfect?
How? Oh my god.
Had closing curly braces before.
Did it? Here. And oh. Oh my goodness. This guy, everybody. I should have believed. I couldn't see it, in all fairness. But yeah, thank you very much. You saved my bacon. This has made the whole demo worth it. I'm excited again. So we're going to add some organizers to this demo. I was about to just give up and walk off stage and go to the pub. We create another one, and yeah, sorry if anyone's like not tried GraphQL before and I'm just rushing through these queries. I kind of hoped everyone had had a play. But the syntax is like, we've got a mutation, we've got like the mutation name, we've got an input object, and we specify what we want to return. So now I've created a bunch of stuff. We can do a query, and this kind of shows off the power of GraphQL because we can query a lot of stuff in one thing and just like, say we're getting like all the groups, I've only made one, the owner name and the organizers for that meetup. So we can go like this and we get back an object with exactly what we specified we wanted, which is really nice and kind of proves it works. So that's good, but like, what's the catch? So like, we can build something. I've written like 120 lines of SQL. I've showed you like hardly any of the things. That big list of things there is like all the tables and all the mutations we can do. So we can do a lot of stuff with like 120 lines of SQL and one Node.js command line tool. But like, so what can't we do? What constraints have we implemented? Well, you would think that like, all right, we can do CRUD and that's about it. That's actually not the case. So with Postgres functions, we can use like procedural query languages or programming languages to do like more complicated things, like with some simple business logic or like anything. And there's a couple of implementations in these. So there's PLP SQL, which is a SQL one. It's probably best documented. It's the easiest one to have a go with. The documentation's more thorough and complete, and there's less weird gotchas. There's also a V8 JavaScript implementation, which is really, really nice if you already know JavaScript, and there are others in Ruby, but I've left them out because I tried to access the documentation and the site appeared to be down. So they're really good, and that means you can actually start to do some business logic. Like I said, things like, hey, when I request a user, like when I register a user, I want you to hash their password instead of just saving it in plain text in a function. You could do more complicated things like, I don't know, like some maths and stuff. And also the other constraint we could think about is like, the apps we build all have loads of like asynchronous integrations with other services, like sending emails and doing Stripe payments and things like that. That actually, like, how would we handle this when we can just do CRUD and functions in a database? So there's a cool little nifty Node.js library to handle this called Graphile Worker that basically lets you specify jobs in your Postgres schema. Like, hey, I've got this add job thing that I can select. I can go like select graphile worker.add job in a function. So like I'm creating a user. I could have one of these that is like email task and send the email with their username and like loads of nice things. So I can send them a nice welcome email. And then I could write some Node.js code that would like pick that up. And it's like very fast and performant and can handle lots of jobs. And you can also offload those jobs onto other things, which is really nice. So it kind of solves those two constraints. And also, like, how do we deploy this thing? It's a CLI tool. Can we really deploy a CLI tool into production? Probably not. Well, there is like some examples. So I've got a little Postgraphile Docker Compose program, which is the demo I showed you earlier. You can clone it and have a go. It's a little bit half finished in terms of the database schema, but if anyone wants to help out, then that'd be very nice. And then the way I think is probably best to deploy it is following this guide here by a guy called Caleb. It's incredible. It doesn't take 2 seconds, but it basically shows you how to set this thing up using AWS Cognito for all your user access and control. So you've got secure accounts built in with things like password resets and just loads of things that you couldn't possibly handle yourself. And it's deployed to serverless, so you pay per use. So you can host something quite cheaply. You have to pay to host a database somewhere, which is a little bit more expensive, but DigitalOcean starts at £15 a month. Shameless plug. Love DigitalOcean. I think I've got a referral link somewhere. But yeah, I should share the referral link. That'd be nice. Yeah, thanks for listening.